Wonderful. Okay, thank you all very much. Joyce, is it cool to kick this off?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Great, thank you. All right, welcome everyone. My name is Leanne Chukoskie. I'm an associate research scientist and the director of the Power of Neurogaming Center at the Qualcomm Institute at UC San Diego. And today, I'm really excited that you're here to join in a discussion with a really great group of participants as we together consider various aspects of neurodiversity in the workplace. Now, we'd originally planned this panel to be part of South by Southwest offerings, but then Corona, so, but now, making lemonade out of our lemons, we get to reflect on how the massive shift we've all experienced in remote work has changed different aspects of this space, for better and for worse. But before we get underway, I want to make sure that I thank a few folks at the Qualcomm Institute QI that helped bring us together today, including Molly Walford, who identified this opportunity. I never imagined myself speaking at South by Southwest, and I guess I get to still imagine it. But she identified this opportunity and helped us kick it off. And Alicia Clark, who's QI's communication director, helped us manage this proposal, the submission, and all the logistics. And Alicia, like us, was planning for a little spring getaway in Austin, maybe next year, right? But I also want to thank Joyce Wong, who has been organizing and managing both this panel discussion and yesterday's virtual gathering so that we can enjoy the outstanding professional meeting services that we have, much like when we all gather together in Atkinson Hall. So great that I just wanted to call out that the Qualcomm Institute staff that continues to deliver excellence and help us continue sharing our work with you, even though we're all remote. So I want to start with a round of introductions, and I'll start with me because I'm already talking. As you know, I'm Leanne, and I just want to, I guess, explain how I got into this, because my background is in neuroscience, and it's weird for a neuroscientist to be leading any kind of discussion on workforce development. But about 8 years ago, my colleague, Professor Jean Townsend, and I had an idea to create a unique attention intervention that was driven by gaze. And the goal was to train weak attention orienting skills in adolescents with autism. It was funded by NIMH, and although we had to create these gaze-driven video games that you play with your eyes, we also had to invent a new way of taking them home so that people could play them at home. So we had this 5-year grant, and it was a whirlwind, but some really interesting things came out of it. And now I'd actually like to share my screen with you so that I can show you a little bit about what those look like. All right. Oops, that's not what I want to share. I want to share this one. There we go, share, and present. So this is, are you seeing the slides? Perhaps not in presentation view. There we go. Now they're in presentation view. This is what the games look like. So we were taking these home, and first of all, I guess it's important that we saw some really great effects of the training that we had the adolescents engage in. And secondly, we realized that although the developer was great, these are on some sort of auto, and I don't really want to continue showing the slides in a loop. So even though we had the games were having good effects, we realized that we needed to bring this work in-house, right? So we couldn't actually continue paying developers out in the world, and so that's when the Qualcomm Institute stepped in and allowed us to form the Power of Neurogaming Center so that we can actually create this kind of ecosystem of learning. And that's where I wanted you to see this slide right here. So really an ecosystem of learning and doing that actually involves people on the spectrum. And the reason for that is because our games actually broke a lot. It was actually the hardware that broke. And so I got to go visit these families, these young people who had amazing skills in art, in narrative and in making games, and in visiting them, realizing that this talent was kind of stuck in their homes, that we really need to get it out there. And so we actually proposed a unique internship program that the San Diego Foundation funded starting in 2018 to have 25 young adults train in making games with us. And so we trained in the hard skills of making video games, the art, the design, the coding, as well as the soft skills that you need to work effectively in a workplace. Through that, I got to learn a lot about what's missing from young adults, you know, their skills that's stopping them get there. They have the hard skills, right? What they need is the soft skills. And so we've been working on that. I have the good fortune of working with my colleague, Pam Cosman, an ECE professor here at UCSD. And we were awarded in 2019 a grant from the National Science Foundation to host 4 more years of this internship, plus some interesting, really useful tech, so that we can help coach young people on the spectrum when they are looking to work but don't have a human coach to help support them. So with that kind of space, we realize that this is a larger conversation that we ought to be having, because only 15% of young adults are actively employed, even though 2/3 want to work. And that's, you know, recently cited that from relatively recent data. So here we are in 2020, and we just hosted our 2020 internship, and we were remote, right? And that brings up another whole twist, as I said in the beginning. So I want to now allow all of our wonderful other voices here to speak and introduce themselves, so that we can start off our conversation of how it is that we can make a better future for young adults in this space and expand diversity options in tech. And I'm next going to ask Amy Johnson to introduce herself. Amy.
Hi, my name is Amy Johnson. I'm a product designer at Tandem in Chicago. I'm autistic and here to represent the neuroatypical people in the tech industry. So in my role at Tandem, I design phone apps, websites, responsive websites and web apps. I also work closely with my developer counterparts on a daily basis. I speak at user experience and tech conferences about neurodiversity because I feel really strongly that representation matters, especially for those with invisible disabilities like autism, ADHD, or dyslexia. I found that there is a far greater amount of neuroatypical people in the design and development fields than is actually disclosed. And this is especially true for women on the spectrum, because autistic women present differently than autistic men and are often undiagnosed until adulthood. So by representing autism in tech vocally, I'm bringing awareness to the fact that neurodiversity is an extremely necessary component to any company's diversity and inclusion initiative.
Yes, and thanks so much for calling that out. That's actually the thing that, you know, here in San Diego, Amy's in Chicago, but we're very fortunate to have her with us today, sharing her talents and experience. The San Diego Foundation recognized that they were not really thinking about diversity broadly enough for that 2018 award, that we really ought to be thinking about, you know, perceptual, social, and cognitive diversity as well. I'd next like to invite up Tori Dunlap to introduce herself. Hello, Tori.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tori Dunlap. I am the CEO of a national nonprofit called Kids Included Together, and we help schools and organizations better serve kids with disabilities in inclusive settings. And I have been doing this for several decades. It became my passion when I was a young drama teacher, and I had a boy with Down syndrome enroll in my class, and I had to quickly figure out inclusion, and it became a real highlight of my experience. It changed my worldview. It changed the worldview of all the kids in the class. And it significantly changed the educational trajectory of the young man with Down syndrome who was in the class. And I was sold. And I joined Kids Included Together in 2003. as a part-time program coordinator, and I've been the CEO for the last 8 years. And I'm interested in a panel like this while I focus on kids, and my passion is really making the world a better place for kids with disabilities. Um, Kids Included Together does this work so that kids grow up in inclusive settings and they grow up to be inclusive adults. But what happens is that kids graduate from high school and there is a significant drop off in inclusion. So kids who graduate high school ready for the workplace cannot find employment. There's kids who graduate high school have trouble finding college programs. Students with intellectual disabilities don't have enough opportunities available to them to pursue their dreams of adulthood. And I think it's really important that we think about inclusion across the lifespan. And while my focus is primarily early childhood to high school graduation, I'm really interested in the work that Leanne and the other panelists are doing to ensure that the kids that I care so much about have opportunities when they graduate from high school.
Thank you, Tori. Yeah, one of the things that as I was dealing with that broken tech and meeting some adolescents, I got to talk to families too. And, I was really new to this at the time, but hearing the stories from families, whereas most people really celebrate their child's high school graduation, these parents are terrified, right? Because there's this thing called the services cliff. That's it. That's all you get. You graduate from high school and you're off, you're on your own. And this is exactly when we need to be supporting all young adults as the parent of a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. Yeah, these folks.
It's not the end of the journey.
No, we need, to wrap them in some support and help them get on that right path to be contributing young adults, and that's very much a part of what we're talking about here. Excellent. And last but most certainly not least, Mike Roberts.
Hey there. So again, my name is Mike Roberts, and I'm the founder and CEO of San Diego Code School, which is a social enterprise committed to developing tech equity through our groundbreaking technology apprenticeship program. And obviously that's backed by a profitable tech services company. So we provide services in exchange for that. We're giving meaningful experience to people that are in the early part of their career. And the thing that really resonates with me is something Amy just mentioned, which is I've been a software engineer for about 31 years now. I've been writing code. And it didn't occur to me until we started using this language to frame neurodiversity that I have a lot of lived experience being in an environment where lots of folks are on various levels of being just neurodiverse. And so software tends to be a place where you can actually be super productive, but it does present some interesting challenges for people early on in their career, for sure.
Yeah, and so I've had the pleasure of working with Mike. He's been consulting for PoNG and helping us professionalize our practices there because, as Pam and I were co-PIs on this grant, we were super excited to get it. It's a little silly to have two people who've spent their lives in the ivory tower say that they're ready to go and prepare people for industry jobs, because we've never done that. So, but Mike has, and so it's been wonderful, sharing what we see, as how to support people on the spectrum, and recognizing that he's been doing it all along, right? But in a very different and professional environment, and I like that a lot. I want to recognize that some people need specialized support, but also that we also need to change our environments to just be more accepting, right? We just need to make sure that we are recognizing what people need to make sure we have more of all of us included. And so I just wanted to start out with asking for observations, and maybe Amy, you'd be willing to kick this one off for us, but some of the challenges that neurodiverse workers face in the technical workspace. Would you be willing to kick that one off for us?
Yes. All right. There's two major difficulties that there are a lot of challenges, but two of the ones that come to my mind immediately that are difficulties I struggle with in the workplace. One is sensory overload at work. It's a real thing. It's really hard to deal with. I personally have trouble with noise and light pollution. So a lot of people in the tech industry work in open offices, and noise and light pollution is a huge problem in those environments. I personally use noise canceling headphones, which helps with office white noise, which a lot of people don't notice, but a lot of open offices have white noise machines. I also use it to keep focused on my topic. And having meltdowns at work is unprofessional. So I find ways to detect when I'm feeling overloaded by these sensory processing things. And, but better yet, I take mental health breaks before I get to that point. The other major area of difficulty that I have is communicating in a clear and concise way. So I've been told that I'm not the best at communicating when it comes to presenting my design work on the fly without notes. So I have trouble parsing clear next steps in conversations and deciphering true intentions from my fellow coworkers. But that all being said, I want to bring up that the remote situation that we all seem to be in since early March. COVID-19 has forced most companies to switch to remote communication. And I thought this change would change my routine so much that it would be really difficult for me. But in fact, it's improved my productivity like tenfold. Remote calls are awkward. So I'm no longer worrying about being singled out for accidentally talking over someone or not recognizing true intent. Believe it or not, emojis and Slack messages are an incredible tool to help everyone recognize tone in otherwise toneless messages. I can control my environment when it comes to sound and light. And I am also able to prepare for client meetings much more effectively and able to have my notes and scripts ready before presenting work, similar to what I'm doing now. I've been thriving in a remote environment. I think a lot of atypical people also feel the same way.
Well, that's such a great observation, Amy, and it really resonates with the internship that we just had, where all 25 of our young adults spoke to, like, well, there was a little bit of adjustment, but they too really liked it. Someone very clearly said the social anxiety that gets in the way of my trying to communicate with someone in person is gone, and so I can just offer up my thoughts and be more useful for work, which was like, wow, okay, so there's perhaps a unique population that is not only really talented in the technical workforce, but really ready for this future of more remote work. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So other comments? Anything you want to add to that? Either Mike or Tori? Potential challenges? No? Okay. So we want to move into that. There's, Amy talked a lot about, and obviously when you're working from home, you can manage your environment and sensory overload. It's definitely a thing when we've worked with a lot of people in the lab on the spectrum, these standard overhead lights that we can't change, so people wear hats, yes, noise canceling headphones are a common thing. Controlling your own environment is huge in that regard, right? But that's something that when you don't have control of your local environment, we need to make sure that is messaged to the people who generally do control those environments. So we're just, moving into that next question of how we begin to shift mindsets and address biases for how it is that one is supposed to work. What we all want is for everyone to be productive, for us to all carry that product across the line, right? That's what we want to do, and to feel productive as a team. So how do we get there when there are these mindsets and biases they're kind of rigid right now? And related, are there any examples in the community of really good work that we might want to point to? Tori, I was wondering if you wanted to mention that. I know that you've worked with some companies, even though your focus is on kids. I know in the past you said you've done some work. Is there any good examples happening in communities that have companies may have shifted mindsets?
I think, well, there's certainly a lot of research and very recent research that companies and the people who lead them, when they see inclusion as a net gain for their business becomes more profitable, more successful, their retention is better. So I think in terms of companies, making the business case for inclusive practices is what's going to help shift the mindset. I think if we approach their self-interest first, and show how this is better for the mind, that research certainly exists. And there are lots of companies kind of coming at it from that perspective. I also think what's happened in the last few months and our kind of racial reckoning about injustice, kind of ongoing and historic racial inequity, gives us an opportunity, and it gives me a lot of hope that we can start to view diversity through this intersectional lens. So we can see that people have multiple identities and they may be marginalized or oppressed based on their different identities. And that gives us a way to think in a broader context about the workplace. And so I think that's going to be something useful also, that we're not just looking in silos at each individual kind of minority or historically marginalized group, but now we're going to maybe look at people as more individuals. And if we do that, then we can work backwards and we can design our, as you were saying, our workplaces, our physical environments, our communication structures can all be re-envisioned thanks to everything that we've been going through, including COVID-19 and a different way of working. We just have this massive opportunity to kind of change how we think about what we're doing for better inclusion. But in order to shift the mindset of corporate America, I think we have to appeal to the bottom line first and foremost. And there's a lot of research that shows us how to do that. There's a McKinsey study in particular that was a study of Brazilian, Spanish, US, and Canadian companies. And those researchers found that when companies had employees with Down syndrome, it created a positive impact on the work culture and environment. It fostered the development of conflict resolution skills, and it increased the self-motivation of employees. So who doesn't want a great work culture with self-motivated employees, right? That is what we all want. And so this research is showing that by including neurodiverse and people of different abilities in the same workplace, it can really help us be better as people and better as companies. So I think, you know, humans are afraid of what we don't know or we haven't experienced. And the biggest barrier that we see in our work at KID is really the fear of getting it wrong, the fear of not knowing what to do, holds people back from opening their hearts and minds to greater inclusion. So that, I think, is just overcoming that fear, helping people overcome their fear of the unknown is where a lot of us can be really useful.
That's a great point, and maybe we need to popularize more success, right? You know, I pointed earlier in yesterday's in the slides, yesterday's showcase event, to a 2017 Harvard Business Review article, and then Mike and I recently wrote something for a Forbes subsidiary about the benefits of neurodiversity. But we really need to call out the specific benefits more, because there are increases in productivity, there are increases in creativity, problem solving. Mike, it looks like you want to add to this conversation.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think a lot of companies get then they advocate for software engineers when they're sort of at the mid and senior levels, say, oh, you want a standing desk? Great, let me go get one of those. Or you need a snack ball? We can handle that. Or treadmill desk. But I think for early engineers, they tend to not be cognizant and they don't think as much about inclusion and diversity. And they think more about, well, we want a cultural fit. We want people that fit within what we're envisioning, working well and being successful. And I think as we get a little bit more forgiving and we are providing people more grace at this time, if we can raise the awareness and have people understand that, you know, there are people that are going to be super talented. You just have to make some adjustments, and some of them are they're gonna add a significant level of interest, right? So I share this sometimes with folks. It's been great working with the folks at both the internship and over at PoNG, because sometimes there's just these wonderful events that happen, and they're very organic. You know, someone will come into the middle of a meeting and make a big announcement, and you know, and everybody's just kind of at first, it's just kind of surprised. And then again, grace. You just say, hey, we're having a meeting right now. Come on in, join us. Like, let's get going. And it's not because a person is intending to, break the norms, but it's just like the norms are not, they don't really exist in the reality at that stage for that person. So I think if we can not view those as people that are not fitting, but instead people that just have a different way that they process their environment, and they can still be super productive in some of your best employees. So I think it's an easy win to say, we should be a little bit more careful about how do we not screen these people out so we don't miss out on this talent that's available.
Absolutely. And one thing, and I'm going to toss this to you in a moment, Amy. One thing that I've noticed in our last, well, actually 3, we had a small iteration in 2019, but in our 2 internship programs, that we really need to teach young people to ask for what they need. First of all, they have to identify what they need, right? What do you need in order to be successful in this environment? Ask for it. I mean, there was one young man that I worked with for a while who is just really lovely. Everyone enjoyed working with him, but he was moving kind of slowly. And he told me after a while, I approached him like, well, is there any way you can maybe do this a little faster? He's like, well, I have a really hard time drawing with a mouse. I'd like one of those drawing tablets. I was like, are you kidding? Like $100 drawing tablet would have solved this problem that we were like, really? So, but that was my blind spot, right? I should have had in place something set up so that he's young. He's grateful for work, right? So how do we reorient ourselves and our processes for bringing young people in particular on so that they don't have to encounter those things? Amy.
So I think, early in my career, it was really hard for me to identify what I needed to ask for. Even if I would feel bad about asking for anything, and I was just grateful for having a job, honestly. So I don't know of a particular solution to that early awkward early stage of career development, but people who are more experienced, who are able to share their neuro status to show that it's okay to be this way, and these are the things that I asked for. Once those neurodiverse people have a seat at the table, companies are going to start listening to those suggestions, and it'll help everybody. But if nobody comes up to bat, nothing's going to be heard. So that's my 2 cents on that.
And that was incredibly well said, Amy. I mean, my greatest hope is that and I'd love to expand the program, but the 25 young people that come through our internship program, they're going to get jobs and they're going to change the way things are done for the next people, right? So we want to stay in touch. We want to help them not just get that first job, but follow them. We want to stay connected so that they recognize that growth is what should always be happening. I'm learning from Mike about being how did this happen? Manager of a small software and game development studio? Yeah. Okay. So I'm learning too, right? But these are the sorts of things that I think we need to message out that, you got a great job. That's great. And here are the next steps for you and for those coming behind you. Yeah.
Leanne, Amy, I love what Amy just said. And that makes me think of the onboarding process, the traditional onboarding process, and kind of adding a mentorship component to it. Because if you're early in your career and it's your first job, you probably have no idea what to ask for or what's reasonable to ask for or what's going to be provided or not provided. And if some mentors that are not, let's expand the capacity throughout the whole organization, could be the people to take new people under their wing and say, look, I asked for this, and this might be possible for you. I think some kind of structured mentorship program as part of onboarding could help get at some of that.
Yeah, one of the things that we have in the internship program is this coach structure, and the coach does a lot, and we couldn't really have somebody quite like that at a job, but you can have somebody who's a coach, who's that mentor, and it's
Yeah,
not
it's just
something
an extra duty of their job.
exactly. They don't need to be clinical psychologists. They don't need to be,
No,
maybe
no.
a little extra trained. They need to understand the policies and procedures and what you have the knowledge of what you're likely to get happen in that's new at your org, right? But not really.
It can also break down the social barriers. I mean, this is kind of a replica of what we would do in a program that we would work with for kids. But if there are social connections happening early on that aren't the leadership level, sometimes it's hard to ask leaders for something. Amy said, you're just so grateful to have a job. You don't want to go to your boss and say, can I please have a? But if you can develop some social relationships with more peers or people just kind of at a different level of the organization that you don't report to, it can help build those social relationships also. And it helps teach the neurotypical people in the organization better about diversity too. So it's a positive experience for them. And then we can help champion people so they do have a seat at the management level, which is really what we need. So I could see a lot of benefits from that. So thank you, Amy, for making my wheel spin.
Did you want to add something else, Amy? I saw you unmuted.
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm just always on mute.
That's cool. No, you're cool. You're cool.
How about you? The last piece I would add is that, a lot of companies empower their employees and peers to be able to do this through like employee resource groups. So an organization shouldn't have to feel like you've got to have a designated person and that you need to have a budget and a lineup. It could just be that you're empowering employees to get together and support one another and identify, here are some ways that we, now that we've been on the job for 6 months or 3 years, whatever it is, can help these newer folks get into the organization and really understand, what does the business do, how does it work, and how do you get the most productivity out of yourself within the structure of the company.
Mm-hmm. So that was actually the next question, right? Is that what concrete steps, and now we're talking about those, can be taken. And I know, Amy, you had some comments about those kind of panels, right? What roles can leaders who want to expand diversity play?
So like actionable feedback for leaders?
Yeah, or like, what can an individual who wants to take some concrete steps? I think I remember you telling me a little bit about get on your local diversity board or
Oh yeah. First and foremost, add disabled people to your environment and hiring committees. Representation matters. Take a critical look at hiring processes. So see if they're as inclusive as they could be. You don't know if someone has a disability just by looking at them. So let them choose how they conduct their own interviews. Do they want to do a remote? Do they want to do an exercise to show their process? If they do an exercise, do the interview people, would they rather them be out of the room or inside the room? Would they work better on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper or on the computer? Let everyone have some say in the process, everyone, not just neuroatypical people. And that's what makes it inclusive. Also, for direct managers, give consistent, precise, and actionable feedback to everyone. And this especially helps neuroatypical people because we're not always aware when we're successful or when we could improve on things. And noting these things specifically helps us grow as designers and developers. I don't know if that answered all the question or not.
Oh, it's so much. It's wonderful, right? So yes, the consistent, precise, and actionable feedback. I'm still working on that, and it's gold. It's exactly what we want to do for everyone. But I sometimes find that my brain isn't keeping up with my mouth, and I'm thinking of things, and it's just kind of coming out. It's not really useful to the person who I want to understand it. So I as a manager, I'm really trying to think about exactly that and how to put that forward. I love what you said also about the interview process, and maybe if we actually just distill that kind of simply to get it going. Like that sounds scary and hard, and policy changes and blah. Like, can we really just move to a point where we're thinking about how can you best show me what you can do?
Mhm.
How can you show,
Exactly.
right? Can we get there? I don't know, Mike, you or
That's
Tori?
like growth mindset, right? So it seems like many times what we're trying to use our process to weed people out and to kind of separate, you know, the ones we don't want rather than find the gems that we do want. So I think that's a brilliant idea to think about the whole process is how do we set people up for success versus how do we create a test and only some people are going to cover the bar and the rest of the people are going to be under the bar. You know, it's not about lowering the bar, but it's more about giving everybody a chance to clear the bar in the best way possible using their own tools. We're going to discover so many new things than putting people in a kind of rigid framework, I think. So I think that I think thinking of it as a growth mindset exercise could be really transformational in the process.
Mike, do you have something to add here?
Yeah, I would say as human beings, especially as software engineers, we tend to be lazy sometimes. And we tend to want the shortcut and the short path. And so in a lot of the hiring processes, you know, they're somewhat flawed in that if they're doing an effective job and they're casting a wide net and they're getting a very diverse set of candidates, then suddenly they have all of these applicants. They have all these candidates flooding in. And then the first thing they say is like, well, we have hundreds of candidates. So now we have to sort of create a mechanism to weed out quickly so we can quickly separate the stronger candidates from the ones that we just don't have time to go through all of them. And I feel like that's lazy, one. But number two, it sort of doesn't help you solve ultimately the problem, which is making sure you're identifying the best candidates and how do you find efficiencies to allow you to do that. So in answer to that, you might work with like an organization like ours where we have vetted candidates and we know sort of the qualifications and skill levels. And so we'll only send you over people that we think would be good fits in your organization. So every community has that, right? There are some, you can go to either the local code schools or you can go to the San Diego Tech Hub or the equivalent in the community and say, hey, do you guys know anybody that might be a good fit for this role? And it's not as labor intensive as some hiring managers might think. Especially if they're just kind of like throwing out job postings and catching whatever comes their way and then discovering like, oh, hey, there's a lot of folks, right? So, I mean, we discovered it ourselves. We put out a call for our apprenticeship program and we had more than 100 candidates apply for 4 positions. I just talked to someone that was a director at Lyft. He started their apprenticeship program. They opened it up just a couple weeks ago. They got 1,000 candidates for 8 positions. Oh. So, I mean, those kinds of numbers, then people are more inclined to say, oh, well, what if how about if we just look at the ones that have a college degree? How many does that weed us down to? And they start thinking about how they can weed down, to your point, Tori, instead of how do we identify the right ones? And so I think tactical things that the companies can introduce and implement are things that, to Leanne's point, demonstrate they have mastered some skill, right? So one of the ways we looked at candidates was to say, we're going to provide some free training and it's specialized in the type of work that we do. So whether or not you get this role, this is great training. This is going to help you in the future. So if you take some of this training, we're more likely to interview you. So how about take advantage of this free opportunity to upskill? And that will also show us who's a little bit more motivated, who's a little bit more intent on learning the skills that will be relevant for this particular job. Now, obviously, those skills have to be in-demand skills for this to work, but there are mechanisms if you're really thinking about it from the candidate's perspective and not just from the company's perspective. How do you help someone early on in their career, even if they're not a good fit for your organization? So I'm a strong believer in the apprenticeship and internship pattern. I think those are patterns that can be used by companies to really give people an opportunity to demonstrate their skill, and they become more equitable when they're paid internships or paid apprenticeship opportunities so that folks are able to demonstrate that they have the capacity to do the work and gain meaningful experience. And they're not being given sort of well, we only hire people with experience, but you don't have any experience yet. So how do you get experience? Like that whole cycle.
That is brilliant. I love that idea of offering the free training because I think from a company perspective, they're trying to reduce risk. And so everything they can do to eliminate risk is kind of where they're coming from. But by doing the free training, you've kind of eliminated the risk of the hiring process, like a try before you buy thing. Sure. And also you have done a wonderful community service. and kind of, you know, done your CSR kind of initiative as well. So that's like a twofer. That's brilliant. I love that.
And as long as you're thinking about it in a way that's equitable, right? So one of the challenges that we ran into in running a traditional boot camp program was, you know, we were charging tuition, and it was a fairly long program. It was an intense 4 months, so you really couldn't work while you're going through the program. So that creates an inequity where, you know, lots of folks are not in a position where they can quit and have 4 months without work plus more work, more time to find the next job, right? So we still want to be cognizant of the position, and are we creating an opportunity for everyone? That's how we look at it. It's like when we're creating a program or trying to model something out, are we creating an opportunity for everyone? Is there any way we can make it more inclusive? And then you're just bound to have more candidates that you will potentially have that will be great fits within your organization.
Absolutely. You know, this reminds me of work that I need to figure out how to pay for at PoNG, that I talked to Mike about, I talked to my colleague Josh Shapiro about, and also Pam Cosman, the co-PI on the grant, that, you know, we want to create tech that helps identify people's superpowers, right? Like, you know, you could actually have it be training, but like, I want to know, like, what's your super skill? And I want to be able to like show it. Right? We should be able to do that. There are all these little games that people use as interviews now, but they're screens, they're, you know, they're filters. But how can we turn those around and use them to say, actually, you know, what are you uniquely good at that maybe you didn't even know how to characterize that? So I think that there's a role for technology here too in this space. But yes, and we all should be moving our internships, definitely paid, ours is paid, I'm very pleased to say that, but moving them more toward this apprenticeship model so that people have some security and longer term engagement. 8 weeks is not enough. It's just a start, but it's not enough. Okay, we are starting to get, does anyone have any last comments on these topics? We're starting to get some questions here in the chat, and I also welcome people raising their hands, and I'll lift that up. We've got, I was actually Pam, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, and then I have one from Tony. I can either choose Tony, tell me if I want to read it or not, but go ahead, Pam, if you want to take this first. Maybe she doesn't want to speak. Okay, so Pam is saying, would you recommend that a neurodiverse individual reveal early on during an interview process that they are neurodiverse? This is a bit of a touchy situation. We talked at length with, oh, there's Pam, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I didn't see an unmute button there. But I'm just curious whether you would recommend that a neurodiverse individual reveal early on during an interview process that they're neurodiverse. Is that likely to help them or hurt them if they do that?
So could I take this one?
Please.
So that's an incredibly personal decision to make. I personally cannot recommend one way or the other because it's so personal. Because it could set you up for discrimination. And although that's like, hopefully doesn't happen, it does happen in this world. And especially early in your career, it could be detrimental. However, if you do speak up, there could be great things that come out of that. So it really just depends on how you want to balance those two things speaking at you from left and right. So I was diagnosed when I was 27. I was diagnosed with ADHD earlier in my life, but then I was diagnosed as autistic at 27, and I don't think I would have revealed that I was autistic when I was younger, but if I knew when I was younger. However, looking back, I might have. It just depends on the situation and the people that you're talking to, and if you're ready to receive possible discrimination.
you for that input, Amy. You know, one of the things that my colleague Jean Townsend and I have had a number of people in the lab over the years, and with this internship program, we get this question all the time. And one of the ways that we address it is, you know, of course, it's personal and it has to be an individual's decision. But if there's something that's obvious that is going to come up in an interview, right, you might want to choose to get out in front of it and just call it. Just give it a name, give it a thing, right? But you know, you don't necessarily know that you're going into a place that is going to be open-minded and supportive. So that's the really hard part. Go ahead, Tori, do you have something you want to say?
Well, I was just going to add to that researching the company on the front end before the interview could maybe help you with that decision. If I can understand that you don't want to feel like you're not disclosing a part of who you are, and that you're able to be your authentic self in an interview sets you up for maybe a better experience at the company, as long as the company's willing to, you know, is the other half of that equation. So I think very thorough research about the culture of the company. You could look maybe even on their websites and see their ED&I statement, or that they have an employee resource group for neurodiverse individuals. I mean, there may be ways you could find out how this information might be received by the company, just to protect yourself, because taking a job is a very, you know, consequential decision to your economic health. You need to make the right decision for that too. So just spending time researching the company from the diversity lens before the interview could help with that decision.
The last piece that I would add is that, you know, we support a lot of students through this process. And, you know, sometimes it's a little disappointing at the very beginning when we're talking to candidates about a future career, knowing that if we can identify it early on, I think, oh man, this is going to be something we have to work through, and we need to have the ability to tell the story. We need to have the ability to get them over the hump in terms of, like, this person is not going to fit the cultural, you know, fit part of what you're looking for. So, and that's for like 90% of the companies out there. We're going to have to warm them up to this person and get them to see beyond some of the things that they'll superficially see in just a few minutes that they have. You know, they all have a short, as we all have our own biases, short amount of time to develop an initial impression. And so they've got to be willing to counteract that initial impression with what are the real skills this person brings to the table? What is their capacity to do the job? Can they be effective? And, you know, then you can kind of figure out, you know, the quirkiness, is that going to be all right? Or is it going to be like, how do we mitigate that, right? But when we have individuals that have that at the very beginning, I think, okay, can I get them a job, right? And if it's a struggle, then we have to kind of work through that. And we have to figure out, are we the best path? We don't want the person to be disappointed that, like, I'm just not qualified to be able to, you know, mitigate maybe the circumstances. But we've seen students with, you know, pretty extreme neuro differences, and they've been successful. They've gotten into shops and done fine. So, you know, it really does depend from employer to employer. But I've lived experience now, 44 years of being a Black male. And so it's not something that you can, I can't code switch that, right? So that's an obvious one. And so there are the realities that you do have to be authentic, and you've got to be able to have that conversation and make sure they can see what skills you bring to the table.
I do want to also throw in a little bit, not a wrench, but early on in your career as an autistic individual, or in, like, again, you might not know what you need. You might not know that you might know you're different, but you might not have a diagnosis even. So I think the best advice in general that I would give people who want to be allies to people who are different is to be friends with your quirky coworkers. Help mentor each other. Like you'll get leadership and mentors and all this, but really it needs to be a more inclusive environment in your workplace.
There's a follow-on question from James. James wants to know if a company can be sued for discriminating against an autistic employee or job applicant.
I'm going to say probably.
That's my
I think you
answer.
can be probably sued for anything, but I think if you disclosed something and you could make a case that, you know, I mean, if the company explicitly sent you an email and said you were weeded out because of that, or, I mean, in the programs that we serve, it's not a hiring decision necessarily, but there are times where organizations will tell a parent that their child can't come to a childcare or a recreational program because we just can't meet their needs. We're not equipped to meet their needs. I could see that. I'm sure some employers have made that same case because they're not educated, I guess. So they could say that we're not able to do it. We'd love to have you, but we don't feel like we can meet your needs. Why don't you go find a job somewhere else? If that were communicated, I do think the employee could. Would they win? I don't know, but you can sue for just about anything.
I'm not going to say that I'm a law expert at all.
Yeah, neither.
But yes, if you disclose that you're one thing and then they communicate that they can't take you because of that thing, then that is definitely something that could be sued over. However, do you really want to be with that company anyway? Like, what's the result of all that, like, heartache, that stress, that, I don't know, haters gonna hate.
Yeah. I don't think it's about like legal advice for what the company should do at all. I think it's just about for applicants to understand the company's perspective, that companies are set up to mitigate risk as much as possible. So I think from the candidate standpoint, understanding that the company might be afraid of that, or that might be their bias against diverse candidates, is a good thing to know. I don't think any of us would give any legal advice to a company about hiring or not hiring, or even to candidates about suing companies, but it's just understanding each other and understanding where the company's point of view is and where the candidate's point of view is, just makes the whole process more transparent.
Absolutely. There is, and I do want to get Tony wants to know more about Amy, in particular, like your design job. Can you talk about how you got started in it and what were your skills and what skills and strengths were relevant to you getting underway in your career?
Well, that's interesting because I recently pivoted my career from a visual designer to a product designer in April. So I just started working with Tandem and it's amazing so far. Basically, I went to school for graphic design, and I did internships, mentorships, mentorships, startups. I worked at a bunch of different places, honing digital skills. And then I started working as a visual designer for a really long time. And then I realized I was really good at app design. So I started getting into the UX world and being mentored by my coworkers. I was able to switch over into product design. So as a product designer, I not only work on the visual aspects of an app, but I also, or website, I also do research. I do user research, but also like company and demographic research. I do architecture analysis, site mapping, production design. Basically, I get to have my hands in all parts of the design process, which is really awesome. And that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I think Tony's considering a career as a designer, having spent a little bit of time doing that recently. That's fantastic. Any other questions from the community? You can either raise your hand or drop it in chat. We've got a few more minutes left. Oh, check the Q&A. There we are. Okay, so thank you, Joyce. Do you guys have any tips for entry employees who want to advocate for neurodiversity within a company, but they're not so sure where to start with that? So either, maybe to take that either as you yourself are neurodiverse or you are an ally and you're trying to advocate. Any suggestions of where to start there? Anybody want to grab that?
There's a lot of different ways that you can do it, but it really depends on the size of the company, honestly. I've been at big companies, I've been at small companies. At smaller companies, mentorship is probably the better programs that are more effective in a small environment. But in bigger companies, they have diversity groups like at Allstate. When I was working at Allstate, there was a group called ABLE. It was the disabilities group that didn't actually have a neurodiversity representative on their team. So I joined that team. A lot of the bigger national companies have these like ERGs, employee resource groups. And there's LGBTQ and Black Women Who Code and those types of groups, which you can join and do activities and raise funds for different organizations. And it's really a matter of like how much you want to get involved in the big companies. But at smaller companies, I recommend mentorship.
Awesome. Anyone else have any suggestions?
I'm going to speak as the CEO of a small company and say that it's wonderful when it's employee driven. So I just love it when, I just, as the CEO, can't think of all the things and can't pursue all the things. But if something's important to my employees and they're able to come forward and say, we'd like to have an ERG about this, or we want to have a task force on something or a training on something, I respond very positively. So I think that's, employees, I guess I'm advising that employees not sit and wait for leadership to get off their duff and do something, because sometimes we're just so overburdened with coronavirus that it hasn't occurred to us. So employee perspective and input is incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. I mean, I had one of the best cry happy days when like an employee came to me, telling me, he was worried about a thing because he cared so deeply about our organization and wanted to make sure this thing was managed properly. I'm like, oh.
Yes. I think when employees don't care and they're disengaged, they quit. But when they care and they love the company, they will bring ideas forward and they will challenge you to be better in ways that you hadn't even thought of. And it's really hard to be open to that, but I think that's where we are in the world, and that's what we have to do as employees and as leaders.
Great. Closing thoughts. Mike, closing thoughts as we...
Just to kind of jump on that, I think now is a great time. We're fairly flat in that everyone's online and remote. So I would think not only within your organization, but outside your organization, who can you connect with? Can you connect across organizations and start sort of making sure that there's a shared effort towards making change? I think there's lots of opportunity. And at some point, we just have to kind of just decide, like, hey, we want to actually address it and put the work in. Some of it's a little of this. We need less of this and more of this. But I think these are some great ideas. And so now it's really just about finding internal champions that you can sort of leverage to make some of these changes happen.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts and ideas? Go ahead, please.
So one of my goals in life is to help companies create more inclusive practices and cultures, so that we're neither excluding or singling out any specific neuro group. Every person on this planet is different in some way, shape, or form. So one size does not fit all. And what I usually leave people with is, let's redefine what we consider a healthy and creative work culture by taking action and adding neuroatypical people to environmental and hiring committees, and making your companies more inclusive all around.
What a wonderful note to end on, Amy. And I hope, I want to throw resources your way. What do we need to do to get what's in your head, like, out to the companies? You ready for like 2 full-time jobs? Is that cool? Ready?
Oh.
Wonderful. Well, I wanted to thank everyone here. I want to thank our panelists tremendously for taking the time and being so open and sharing with their experiences, so that we can really, hopefully soon, enjoy a better future of work for all individuals across the vast human spectrum of diversity. I also want to thank the folks that made this happen, Joyce in particular, who's working things and reminding me that today is different than yesterday. You take the QA, not the chat. Thanks. And also all of you who've taken the time. I appreciate the interns who are attending to listen on their last day of this internship that's been so meaningful and wonderful. Thank you for all the parents who are here, for industry folk who are here, who are thinking about, hey, there's some messages here that I want to take back to my workplace, and I hope you do. And I hope you feel free to reach out. My last name is pretty unique, Chukoskie. I'm at UCSD. Feel free to mail me. I'd be happy to talk with all of you. Thank you once again, and be well.
Thank you.